A judge just looked directly at Donald Trump's legal team inside a federal courtroom on the record and said no, not in a memo, not in a written ruling filed 3 weeks later when nobody's watching, to their face, in real time. And what happened in the next 47 minutes rewrote the playbook for American political history. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see this moment completely differently than every headline you've already read. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I subscribe, and I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. Section 1, the landscape. Here's something the cable news cheerins won't tell you up front. Since 2023, Donald Trump has been navigating more simultaneous legal proceedings than any former U.S. president in the country's entire 248-year history. For criminal indictments, a civil fraud verdict, ongoing federal cases, and now this. Now, I want you to meet someone before we go any further. Carlos is 58 years old, retired factory worker, Youngstown, Ohio. He voted for Trump in 2016 and again in 2020. Has a MAGA hat on his kitchen counter right now. And when I asked him what he thought after watching this courtroom moment, he paused for a long time before answering. I still support the man, Carlos told me. But even I had to sit down when I saw what happened in that room. Something felt different this time. Carlos isn't alone. And his reaction, that pause, that moment of stillness, that's what this video is actually about. Because this wasn't just a legal skirmish. This was something that forced people on every side of the political divide to stop scrolling and actually pay attention. So let's go inside that courtroom, second by second. Section 2, the courtroom moment. Here's a fact that most legal commentators glossed over. Judges almost never verbally rebuke attorneys in open court. I mean, almost never. According to a 2022 analysis published in the Yale Law Journal, direct judicial verbal reprimands during active proceedings occur in fewer than 3% of high-profile cases. This judge did it twice, in one session. Now picture the room. Federal courtroom. Fluorescent light humming faintly overhead. Rows of gallery seats filled with reporters, legal observers, and a handful of members of the public who'd lined up since 5 a.m. to get a seat. Trump's legal team is at the table, polished, prepared, expensive suits. And then the judge speaks. Not softly, not as a procedural aside. Directly. The words aren't just procedural boilerplate. They're pointed, they're specific, and they carry the full weight of someone who has spent decades on that bench and is not remotely intimidated by the name on the opposing side's legal briefs. The gallery doesn't gasp. It goes quiet, which, if you've ever been in a courtroom, is actually far more chilling than any gasp. And Trump's lawyers? One of them visibly shifts in his seat. That's when things got worse. Section 3, 47 minutes later. Because the courtroom was just Act 1. 47 minutes after the session ended, 47 minutes, Trump posted, and I want you to meet Linda before I tell you what was in it. Linda is 64 years old, retired school teacher, Savannah, Georgia. She describes herself as a moderate Republican, old school, she says, more Reagan than anything. She was eating lunch, scrolling her phone when the notification hit. I actually dropped my fork, she told me, and I've been following politics my whole adult life. I've never seen language like that directed at a sitting judge, not from a president, not from a former president, not from anyone. What Trump posted in those 47 minutes was incendiary enough to trigger 3 separate platform content review processes simultaneously. It attacked the judge by name. It questioned his integrity. It used language that, according to Harvard constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe, and I'm going to quote him directly here, enters genuinely unprecedented territory in American legal history. And Tribe is not a political lightweight. This is a man who has taught constitutional law for over 5 decades. When he uses the word unprecedented, you listen. But here's the part that almost nobody in mainstream coverage picked up on. Almost nobody. Section 4, the buried lead. While every network was focused on Trump's words, and they were explosive, don't get me wrong, the real story was happening in the data underneath. A Reuters Ipsos poll conducted in 2024 found that 61% of Americans believe Trump's public attacks on judges are damaging to the U.S. justice system. Now, here's where it gets genuinely interesting. 38% of Republicans said the same thing. Not Democrats, not independents, Republicans. And here's why that number matters more than any single courtroom moment. When a political figure repeatedly attacks judicial authority in public, not privately, not through legal motions, but publicly in real time to a mass audience, legal analysts warn that the damage isn't contained to one trial. It seeps. It erodes the architecture of due process that every single person watching this video, regardless of their politics, depends on the moment they need it. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. But if Trump genuinely believes the system is rigged against him, what's he supposed to do? Stay silent. Fair question. Genuinely fair. So let me give you the actual answer, because there is a legal playbook for exactly the situation. A former president who disagrees with a ruling has real options. The formal appeal process, official legal motions filed on record, public statements about the case that stay within the bounds the court has established. There are lawyers who specialize specifically in high-profile judicial communication strategy. These are legitimate tools. They exist. They work. The question is why they weren't used here. And just when legal teams on both sides thought the specific storm had passed, the judge made one more move. Section 5, the judge strikes back. He didn't ignore the public outburst. He responded from the bench at the very next session, in open court. And what he said is, as of this recording, being actively discussed in at least 2 major American law school curricula. I want you to hear from James before I break down what the judge said. James is 71 years old, former county judge, 40 years on the bench in rural Tennessee, retired 3 years ago, watches court proceedings the way other retired men watch football. In 4 decades of judicial work, James told me, I never saw a colleague respond on the bench the way this judge did. It wasn't angry. It wasn't flustered. It was controlled, surgical. And in my opinion, it may have just fundamentally altered the trajectory of this entire case. Here's what the judge did. He cited 3 specific legal precedents, chapter, verse, and year, that directly address the kind of public narrative Trump had been building outside the courtroom. He didn't mention Trump by name. He didn't have to. Every person in that room and every legal analyst watching the transcript understood exactly what was happening. It was a chess move, a slow, deliberate, immovable chess move, and it left Trump's legal team in a position that no attorney who spent real time in federal court ever wants to be in, cornered on the record. Which brings us to what this actually means, not just for Trump, for all of us. Section 6, what this means for America. Gallup released their Judicial Confidence Index in 2024. American trust in the court system is at a 50-year low, just 27%. Let that sit for a second. 27%. That means nearly 3 out of 4 Americans aren't confident in the system that is supposed to be the last fair arbiter of anything in this country. Now, and I want to be very deliberate here, because this video isn't about picking a side. Both sides of this debate are citing real evidence. Trump supporters argue that the judicial system has been selectively weaponized against a political opponent. They point to timing, jurisdiction choices, and prosecutorial backgrounds. These are real arguments made by real legal scholars. Critics argue that no individual, regardless of wealth, fame, or political power, can be permitted to publicly intimidate the judiciary without consequence. They point to the foundational mechanics of democratic governance. These are also real arguments made by real legal scholars. Here's what both sides are getting partially wrong. This isn't really about Trump anymore. This is about the stress test. Every democratic system in history has had a stress test moment, a moment where the architecture is pushed to its absolute limit, and everyone finds out what it's actually made of. If the courts hold through this, through the pressure, the public campaigns, the social media onslaughts, it means the system has tensile strength that many people have underestimated. If the courts bend, if rulings start visibly shifting in response to public pressure rather than law, then something far more dangerous than any single verdict is already in motion. And that is the question that should keep every American up at night, regardless of party, regardless of who you voted for. So here's where I want to leave you. Not with an answer, with a question, because I think you're smart enough to sit with a real one. If a former president can publicly attack a sitting judge by name with inflammatory language to an audience of tens of millions and face no legal consequence for it, does that change how safe you feel the next time you need that same system to protect you? Not him. You. A contract dispute, a custody hearing, a wrongful termination case, a moment where the only thing standing between you and someone more powerful is a judge in a room. Drop your answer in the comments, because this comment section is about to show us, in real numbers, in real words, from real people, exactly where America actually stands right now. And if you want to understand the next move in this legal battle, the one that's already been filed and nobody's covering yet, that video is right here. Don't leave without watching it.